Hi, everybody, and welcome to my weekly cult situation report, where I tell you about everything in the world of cults and in my world of cults. I'm Danielle, a scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership. Thanks for being here. I'm also former Captain Mestenek in the United States Army. I wrote a book called Uncultured about growing up in the Children of God religious cult and then going into the cult of the U.S. Army. It is sold out of hard copy. It was sold out of paperback copy for like a month, and yay, it's back now. So you can get signed copies linked here if you are interested. Now I'm working on a book called The Culting of America, and I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end. So, this is week 5 of the Trump administration, and we are seeing that there is quite a bit of pushback against him, right? They're still trying all the things. He's trying to be a dictator. He wants to be a dictator. He has nothing really to lose, right? The worst that's going to happen is he'll have to leave office in 4 years. I do kind of feel like they are trying too many things too fast, right? Elon Musk is doing cult of entrepreneurship tactics, move fast and break things. And I think at some point people are going to start pushing back even more. Like we expect to see some sort of tipping point with the American people. I do want to say, I feel like there's a lot of teleological thinking going on right now. And teleological thinking is approaching the end as though the outcome were already decided. And the outcome of America has certainly not already been decided. This message is kind of crazy. People keep saying, like, oh, like, what if he wins? Like, if he wins, he's a dictator, he stays in office. We don't just sit down and lose, we still got to fight. you know? We still like the American people are the ones that decide how they are going to be governed. Um, One thing, I have a video going very viral right now on TikTok where I talked about the cult leader is not necessarily interchangeable. And I think people are overlooking that when we talk a lot about the cult of MAGA. I honestly think the best thing that could happen is if Felon 47 just didn't wake up. I think we would start to see MAGA start to crumble. Shady Vance has absolutely zero, nilch, no charisma, right? That guy puts his cast iron in the dishwasher. And love him or hate him, right? Donald Trump has charisma. He is a charismatic leader. No, I will not argue this point. If you are under his spell, you get it. And if you're not, you don't get it. Probably unless you're someone that studies charisma and leaders. But it is there. Shady Vance doesn't have it. Elon Musk, in my opinion, doesn't have it. He's tried to like lead a bunch of his little organizations to be cults and usually fails as soon as he gets his own personality involved. Um, but that being said, the pro-natalist movement that he's all a part of, like, oh, very eugenicsy, let's have our kids, let's have tons of white babies to save the world. That's kind of culty, for sure, for sure, for sure. Okay, so the cult leader is not just interchangeable, right? Very often, what we see happen when a cult leader unalives or is somehow taken out of the picture is that the cult will fracture and split up. Doesn't always end it, but it causes a lot of damage. And with a political party like that, it would be pretty significant. I don't think that MAGA just transfers their love and devotion. Nobody loves Shady Vance, probably not even Usha. Okay, so, just I've spent a lot of time this week on lives and even on a podcast talking about like the value of threat assessments and talking about the most likely and the most dangerous, right? Right now, havoc is being wreaked in the federal government. I live here in DC. It is not great. Everybody's on edge. I hope y'all are remembering to buy nothing today, by the way, for the economic strike. Um, but there are many, many things about the American way of life that have not changed. That doesn't mean they're not coming for them. I really think it's important for us all to be educating ourselves now. But I also think it's important to be talking accurately about the things that are going on. And because if we just go straight to the worst case all the time, that does not equip us well to fight back. Even if the worst were here and they're putting us in labor camps, we still got to fight back. We still got to have a resistance. Can you imagine what the late diagnosed autistic women shenanigans would be run in labor camps? Like, come on, we know how to do so many things. This week, speaking of cults, I started talking about Tudor England, and I started a little thing called Knitting Tudor Lady because I definitely should have gotten my autism diagnosis when I was 18 because everybody watched The Other Boleyn Girl, but not everybody went and, well, read The Other Boleyn Girl and then went and taught themselves everything about Tudor England. Though I am finding it is a pretty common white neurodivergent girl and lady pastime. But I find it to be interesting because, as neurodivergents, we have these deep interests. But my deep interest wasn't, I wasn't studying horned toads. I was studying one of the most tyrannical leaders in history and learning all the stuff about that. So I've started talking about it and relating it back to what's going on right now because I think cult leaders are very King Henry VIII. And in fact, in Uncultured, I compare the cult leader, the battalion commander, sorry, brigade commander that I'm comparing to a cult leader to King Henry VIII. So I think, one of the things that we see with the Tudors, all of the Tudors, not just King Henry VIII, but also all of his children, where they had like inappropriate favorites. Not always someone they were sleeping with, sometimes a counselor, but they were inappropriately controlled by their favorites and gave them inappropriate amounts of honor and money and power, just like what we are seeing going on right now. But once the favorite was out of favor, it is off with your head and never to be seen again. I think this is kind of what's significant about the spillage of classified materials on Leon's website. Because, the president is the classification authority. So the president, for most things, can be like, yeah, I'm just not going to pursue that. I gave him access. But if he ever wants to just have him taken away for spilling classified information, he can also do that. This is an important thing to cult leaders. It's called come here, go away behavior. And they need to keep all of their closest lieutenants very unstable because they don't want them coming for his power. This is also another reason I think he doesn't surround himself with charismatic people because he doesn't want them to take away from his shine, right? So this is all pretty classic cult leader stuff. The favorites, from King Henry VIII to now hasn't really changed with cult leaders. Come and check me out on TikTok if you haven't already. I've had to start a new account, which is at Knitting Cult Captain. We're going to switch it back to Knitting Cult Lady. We're just in the switcheroo now. I got deplatformed, but this time I was prepared and I had an already monetized backup, and we just switched right over. And of course, we're selling books there again. So come check that out. But you'll get to see my Tudor England series. I've also been doing more lives, cooking and chatting with people because, of course, I grew up in this cult all over the world and was a kitchen slave from the age of 11. And so people have asked me to share some of the recipes. And it's also a way for me to trick my neurodivergent brain into cooking right now because it's not something I am particularly enjoying. So come cook with me sometimes. And speaking of spies, we saw that the CIA is getting rid of their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs because only straight white male spies have ever been needed in the history of ever. We saw the song at the governor's ball, right? The song from Les Mis and the way that it was being sung definitely seemed like a protest. The captain who leads the army band is Captain Bonnie Alger. She's the first woman to lead the army band. I hear she has 2 masters and a PhD and teaches here at University of Maryland near me. I would guess that she picked the song, and looks like it was done as a form of protest, including the way they performed it. And in evidence of this, seemingly, her profile disappeared from the army band page for 24 hours. Now, I think during that time, they realized that MAGAs were going to make excuses, say that their side chose it and they've chosen it before and it's blah, 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 but they couldn't let people believe that if they appeared to have fired the captain. So then they put her back. I've asked a lot of MAGAs what their answer for this is, and nobody's really had an explanation. So, but I do think this is yet another sign that the military is going to stand with the people. And I remind you that the military is the people, right? We all know probably somebody in the military. It is our friends and uncles and cousins and sisters and mothers and daughters and everything else. Um, it is significant, of course, that Donald Trump is firing heads, generals, that Pete Hogsbreath is taking 4-star qualified generals out of jobs and putting in 3-star unqualified people that need waivers, military waivers, just to hold the job. That being said, this doesn't change the fact that they don't understand our military, and our military is not top down. So, yes, it's concerning that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is telling Donald Trump that he'll kill for him, but the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff doesn't do a lot of killing. It is the privates and the specialists and the lieutenants and the captains that do the work of running the actual military. And I do not think they even understand this. People have been telling me nonstop, like, oh, he's just going to replace everyone with loyalists. Approximately 1 million people in the military are Democrats. And even of the other half that are likely more Republican, most of them are not compromising all of their values and willing to commit war crimes, like, on behalf of this guy. Let's remember that the military is a cult led by an idea, and that idea is the American Constitution. As I've started to say to people, if Hogsbreath and Felon 47 can change the culture of a 2 million person organization this quickly, then maybe they deserve to take over America, because we have not seen really that kind of power yet. So I think we're seeing a lot of different signs that individuals in the military are pushing back, are doing what they're supposed to do, are saying no to things. And we're seeing this throughout the government. We're just not seeing things happen the way they've happened before, right? As I said 1 or 2 accounts ago, right? Like, I believe that all of the checks and balances of America are going to be tested in the next 4 years. So, what can we do about it? Well, one of the things is we white ladies can get to work. One of the things I'm doing for my own practice and education right now is reading through this book, White Women Get Ready: How Healing Post-Traumatic Mistress Syndrome Leads to Anti-Racist Change. And we've had this woman, Amanda Gross, on the podcast. You can check out that wherever you're watching this video on the podcast, Cults and the Culting of America, to talk about kind of the cult of white supremacy and the ways that we as white women have been indoctrinated, and what the work is that we need to be doing. But one of the things I find myself saying to people a lot is that the best person to get somebody out of a cult is a former cult member. Okay, so now that the cult is in power, we are going to start seeing people waking up, right? In the whole last 4 years, sorry about that. The whole last 4 years, they could promise anything, right? If we were in power, when we're in power again, we'll be able to do this. But the promise of the cult is always a lie, and people are already starting to wake up to a bunch of the lies. So, as these people are starting to wake up and open their eyes, I think it's really important for us white women to be able to go in and get them and talk about what worked and talk about what woke us up. You don't have to been all the way in the cult of MAGA ever to have been still indoctrinated by the cult of white supremacy. And this book is so relevant to right now. My favorite quote already, which I'm pretty sure I'm going to put in the Skinny White Woman chapter of Culting of America, is, as more than one black woman in my life has confided to me, if white women would get their act together, oppression wouldn't stand a chance. So Amanda was reading about post-traumatic slave syndrome, And so she asked, well, where's the book on post traumatic master syndrome and how everyone is affected, right, by racism? And that book it didn't exist. And then she started thinking about post traumatic mistress syndrome, which is a corollary to that, and how white womanhood has been part of oppression for a long time and the ways that we can end that and stop that. So this book was her answer to doing that work. I'm very excited to be working through it. It's 400 pages. I'm going to be working through it for a few months. I'm also partnered with this author and publisher. It is a minority woman veteran owned indie publisher who helps people get their books out that maybe, the status quo wouldn't like or doesn't think there's a market for. I am going to be publishing Culting of America with this publisher as well. So just in case you want to know who you're supporting if you buy the book, it's pretty cool. And if you follow me on TikTok or Patreon or Instagram, and maybe sometimes on YouTube, you'll see snippets of me reading this book so you can follow along if you are interested. This is my series called Devotions with Daniela. Speaking of the Woo to Q pipeline, unfortunately, there were 2 deaths of children to measles in Texas, something that hasn't happened, I believe, in a decade. So here we go, right? With RFK sworn in, we are seeing some of the implications of the Make America Healthy Again, I think, MAHA movement with vaccine skepticism. I'm reading this book right now called Conspirituality, so you'll see a lot of different quotes and videos about that from me also. But like, this is always kind of the pattern, right? In times of social turmoil, up will pop these cult-esque leaders that mix spirituality and like paranoia and conspiracy theories together. And vaccines always part of it. And the healthy, crunchy pipeline to alt right conservatism is a really real thing. And, cults always use purity requirements. And there is a connection that humans we have had for a long time with like our blood and what gets injected into our bloodstream and the concept of purity. And this is what's being, of course, used and exploited by conspiritualists. I don't know what this word is. Okay. There's this interesting duality here, right, that we see over and over in cults and cult-like movements where people are seekers and questioners and they're unhappy with the answers that they've been given. So they start to look for other non-traditional sources, right? This is not a bad thing. But then something captivates them, like a new idea, a charismatic leader, right? And they suspend their disbelief and they're able to be talked in to believing crazy stuff. Right. So, one of the reasons we saw this huge surge in cults of the 60s and 70s is because of the civil rights movements and justice movements and all of these important things that were going on. When people were waking up to the fact that our systems aren't working for everyone and wanting to pull them down and create change. Right. And the civil rights movements of the 60s and 70s were important. So much important stuff happened. Of course, the current cult leading our government is trying to set a lot of that back, but like all of that stuff was good and important. I'm just a kid that was sacrificed on the altar of the cults that came out of that, right? And if you are someone that grew up in a white American led cult that came out of the 60s and 70s or went to Bible college, a lot of it came out of people upset about the end of segregation, and it literally was about keeping us from them. So if that fits you, white American led cult, you probably definitely have a lot more internalized racism and hierarchical programming than you realize. That's again something that deconstructing the cult of white supremacy can help us with. I truly believe that once we understand whiteness, we can use it as a shield for those who don't have it and as a weapon for those who are, trying to keep the cult of white supremacy in power as a weapon against them, of course. Um, so on our two podcasts this week, we had a discussion with White Woman Whisperer on the podcast Hey White Women, which is now like 27 episodes or something. We've been doing this for a minute, y'all. And we are fully monetized, which is so super amazing. Thank you all so much for all the listening and all the engagement, and of course for buying my book, because that is what's helping me fund most of these projects and talk about cults for a living. So, the episode with White Woman Whisperer that we launched this week, called The Myth of Making Money, because, you can't actually make money, it's illegal. Um, White Woman Whisperer shared how she feels that because women can make things like babies and clothes, of course, men can too, if anyone can, if they want to. They get mad that they can't make things, so they just try to make money. We had a very interesting conversation. We talked about music and cult experiences and cultural identity, and how growing up in a cult, of course, influenced my music preferences, even though I didn't think that. But also a lot of emotional suppression, which is what cults are always doing. We talked about cultural appropriation in the music industry, the impacts of fame, and the challenges of navigating cultural identities. We also spent a lot of time reflecting on our own personal journeys. We talked a lot about what anxiety and panic and apocalyptic reasoning is doing right now, which in a lot of cases is just like helping people to not have to actually do the work and actually prepare and actually fight back. So hopefully we keep talking about that stuff. In the end, we talk about like how great it could be to have a gig economy that fosters connection and collaboration while also addressing all the isolation that we have. But of course, we have a lot of systems in play to get between there and here. Check out Hey White Women, our podcast, and you can also watch the videos wherever you're watching this. Um, and then the other podcast is Cults and the Culting of America. And on that podcast, we had a conversation with another Scott. His last name is. Oh no, I don't have it here. Whoops. Okay, well, Scott has a book called Asian American Apostate, which I feel for sure we're going to put in Cult Memoir Book Club in the future. And we had a really good conversation with him because he grew up in, super, 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 super evangelical, and all the way through being an adult, right? Went back and taught at Bible college, but then slowly, was sort of radicalized into leaving religion. And now is writing and speaking and doing all kinds of interesting stuff. Check out this episode. I think that there was also an interesting conversation that we had about like real scholarship versus apologetics, right? Which is what is done at these Bible colleges, where they are coming at every question, but like in order to try to prove their point or prove their interpretation of the Bible. And this is not how real science and real scholarship is done, right? If there is information, like you're supposed to be trying to prove yourself wrong in the scientific method, right? So just some stuff to look at. And of course, there's all this relationship with evangelical Christianity and the Trump regime right now, right? They don't want people to be thinking too closely about things. But remember, information is never bad, and we should be thinking about all of the things. Oh, Scott Okamoto, that's his name. And then, of course, in every cult baby story, right, we're going to talk a lot about finding identity afterward. I mean, he had the whole Asian American experience layered in on top of that as well. So, very, very interesting conversation. We continue to have really cool, awesome conversations. Last month for Cult Book Club, we did Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died. Really good discussion around that. For Cult Theory, we read Yanya Lalich's Take Back Your Life Part 2, which is all about leaving a cult. And so we had a pretty deep, interesting conversation about those topics. If you're interested in Cult Book Club, you can access those through our Patreon at our $10 subscriber level. Um, and it's 2 different meetings a month. You can drop in. You don't have to have read the books. This is not college. We just have great conversations around these topics and themes. This coming month, March, oh, we're reading A Billion Years by Mike Rinder about Scientology. Unfortunately, Mike Rinder just passed away from, I believe, cancer. And it has kind of shook a lot of the cult survivor community because he was still pretty young, just 60s, and because, we tend to have shorter lifespans a lot of time because of all of the trauma. Um, Billion Years is a very interesting book to get from someone so high up in an organization. And we also don't have that many male cult survivors who deconstruct and then turn around and tell their stories. So it's nice to have this book by Mike Rinder, and that is what we'll be working on. And we'll be finishing the final third of Dr. Yanya Lalich's Take Back Your Life. Um, I can't think of what topics they are. In the rest of Cult Theory Book Club, we're gonna read. We already read Margaret Singer's "What Cults Are You In," and then we're gonna read. Next, we are going to read Alexandra Stein's "Love, Terror, and Brainwashing," and then we are going to read Martha Stout's Sociopath Next Door." We've had psychologists and sociologists suggest that it might be actually impossible to heal from cults and group trauma without really understanding them and understanding what you went through. And this is what Cult Book Club is ultimately trying to do for people. Thank you all so much who are part of it. Okay, update on the book GoFundMe. We've raised over $2,000, which means the audiobook is paid for. There will be an audiobook of Culting of America. Thank you all so much. If you are interested in contributing to our fundraiser, the link will be in the descriptions. We appreciate every little bit of it. I am doing this book by myself so that I can own it and that I can do entrepreneurial and innovative things with it, and also so that I can write what I want to write because I'm being very critical of kind of a lot of big groups in society. Um, Mostly I'm funding it by selling copies of Uncultured, and it is going pretty good so far, but of course every little bit helps. It is about a $100,000 publishing process that I am taking on to get you a hopefully very, very good quality book. Also rebuilding up my TikTok, of course, because of the switcheroo. So just a reminder to come follow me on the other account, Knitting Cult Captain. And on the book, I got no writing done this week or editing done because everything blew up a little bit. But we got our 500 books in and we got caught up on all the back orders. I did last week complete the first round of edits on Us versus Them, Chapter 7, and Chapter 8, Exploitation of Labor. So next week, I will begin working on high entrance and exit costs. And this is Chapter 9 of 11. So I'm getting there. The elephant is getting eaten. We still don't have exact timeline for Culting of America, but me and quite a few other people are working on it as hard as we can. It's a big, big job publishing a big, big book, and I appreciate all of you being here with me along the way. I also do, as I get chapters back from my editor, post those in the Patreon, and you can listen to those or watch those chapters as they become available. And now for some nitpicking. Well, I'm going to show you first this collar that I make. I call this the cottagecore collar. And oh, by the way, I have started knitting Cult Ladies shop in my TikTok, so you can just show up and get one of a kind things with the click of a button. This one will be up there soon if you're the person that gets it. This is a cool scarfigan that I made. So scarfigan is where I take a scarf and turn it into a cardigan with crocheted or knitted sleeves. I took the sleeves, I had cut off another jacket to put fuzzy sleeves on, and then I crocheted this here and attached the sleeves. I also finished this jacket for a friend of mine, fuzzy cult coat in a lovely maroon, and I made two types of circular logic earring. I'm going to let her choose if she wants the loop or if she wants this one with this cool bronze design on the inside. And that's what I got for this week. I sent out a few other things that I completed. So I just been working away. As we know, if you're interested in getting some custom items, you can come check out my shop at Knitting Cult Captain on TikTok. Thank you all so much for being here today and for being part of my online communities. We will make it through this as a community. I think that we will. See you all next week.